that it's not a full experience if you don't attend that party. All right? You haven't been to RootCon if you haven't been to the PostCon party. And after the speaker, we'll do the awardings. Also, the closing remarks. The closing remarks would tell you everything about next year, what's going to happen, what's our plans, etc., and what has transpired, like a summary for this year. All right, so all the attendees that are currently outside, we're inviting you to the main tracks. All right, for our last speaker, let's give her a round of applause. I don't need to introduce him. He's the biggest guy in the room, right? Big Daddy O. Go, go, go.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so I guess they saved the best for the last. No, I'm just kidding. All the speakers were great. I enjoyed some of the talks while I could because half the time I'm actually drunk, which is what I love about RootCon. But right now I'm not, so I'm here to talk to you about 50 Shades of Purple. Please no more alcohol, guys. I'm not asking for alcohol. Okay, so what is 50 Shades of Purple, right? It's something that we have been doing for quite a period of time that I have been looking into throughout my entire journey. Now in cybersecurity, it kind of transited into this particular element. So I first started as a cybersecurity rate teamer in the government in Singapore, in a government technology agency. And then after that, I moved on to the blue team to lead the implementation of Purple Team across the entire government itself. And after that, I left, and now I'm at the Pickers Security, which if you Google, you probably will come up. The first thing is adversary exposure validation. That's probably something that you will be interested in if you're really into purple teaming. But today's talk, I'm not going to dive into such a large extent of it. What I'm going to be talking about is actually purely based on how do you set up a purple team program internally within your organization, or how do you even get started with purple teaming as an operator. Oh, yeah, sorry, that's, I was supposed to show this, but that's my link tree, because I'm cool now. I have my LinkedIn and GitHub all linked in one link itself. All right, yeah, guys. Okay, so anyway, before we get started, disclaimer is basically just, that everything over here is actually of my own work research. Is purely done within this particular constraint myself. It may differ from organization to organization, so you may not, just implement it blatantly, directly, because it may not work in your environment. You got to understand how exactly it is supposed to be to do purple teaming. So what are we going to talk about? Well, pretty straightforward. We're going to start off with what is purple teaming? What is the differences between red, blue, and purple? And then how do you roll out purple from a traditional point of view? And last part is when I'm going to talk about the context. We talk about automation. We talk about ways that we're able to go on, what everybody likes, shifting left, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about, the last part. So the first part is if you haven't realized, cybersecurity has now become a rainbow because there's just so many colors now. You started with red, blue, and now you have green, you have orange, you have yellow, you have white. So today I'm going to talk about one segment of the rainbow, which is purple. So why do people want to do purple teaming? I've been thinking about it for a long time. I was thinking of how to explain this to CISOs who has never heard of purple teaming before. Or they will ask me, so how does this differ from red team? How does this differ from me running a VAPT? The idea behind it is you currently are being faced with a very complex situation in any organization when you want to do detection. You have your EDRs, you have your NG firewall, you have your WAFs, everything that's being piped over, even your own log collection pipeline. So all these are actually being piped back to your SIEM. But how do you verify whether or not this has been turned on? A big problem that a lot of CISOs are facing right now is that, after a breach, we should have detected that. Something very big happened last year with a very big bank in Indonesia, where they have the top boys. So you're talking about your Paolos, you're talking about your CrowdStrike as your product, but they got breached. And then they were wondering, how did I get breached? And actually, they got breached because some guy turned off some of the rules and forgot to turn it back on. But to the CISO, they're always thinking, hey, I have these rules. It's supposed to be protecting me. I'm able to detect this particular attack. But if you don't validate it, how do you know about it? And that's why we're doing purple teaming. So this briefly wraps up these two. I'm gonna read it from the slide because you can read as well as I do. So the idea behind it is you want to validate what you don't know, and you want to validate what you already have. All in all, it's talking about how do you make sure that your defenses are doing what it's supposed to be doing. So where can it exactly fail? The first one is, of course, are your controls keeping up, right? So am I having a signature lag between my EPPs, between my NG firewalls, or whatever other kind of signature-based kind of detection system or prevention system you have? Do I have a configuration drift? Is it, this particular system is actually being activated over here and it said that I'm able to do this, but actually another system is being set up differently. You don't even know that. You have two different configurations within your environment. And the last one is, of course, as I mentioned just now, unknown effectiveness. You never know whether or not your defenses are really working until you have really tested it. So what about detection pipeline? When we talk about prevention just now, let's talk about detection. So how can detection fail? And there's multiple failure points it is. All in all, for the wave of the uninitiated to what is a detection pipeline is basically how you're collecting the logs and how is it being triggered within your SIEM for SOC analyst, for incident responder to act on this particular alert itself. So throughout this whole pipeline, you start off with, telemetry generation. Have you got the correct logs? Are these logs being generated out from your systems? Are you passing these logs and normalizing them correctly over to your SIEM? And lastly, do you have the alerts, the detection rules actually being returned into your SIEM itself? And everything that I just talked about, it can be solved by purple teaming. How? Let me just walk into it. Yeah, okay, anyway, this is a meme for basically, if you don't use purple, this is what the whole idea I just talked about just. So how exactly does one eat the purple pill? I hope everybody gets a reference, Matrix, red pill, blue pill, now we have the purple pill. Yeah. The first thing is, I want to debunk the myth, red plus blue is not purple. And I blame marketing for it. If any marketing professionals are here, I don't blame you. I blame people for the way that they're marketing what exactly is purple teaming. They're constantly saying that you just have to put two teams together and that's how it works. So the debunk comes, you need to understand what exactly is the difference between red, blue, and purple. The first one is, what is a red team? A red team's core objective has always been, if you're doing VAPT, then you're finding vulnerabilities within specific systems or specific applications. If you're doing red team, then you're basically testing the defenses as an actual attacker. The key thing here is you want to be a realistic assessment. So that means you have to be scoped. You have to have time. You have to have maybe like 6 months to plan for this whole thing. You have to behave like a real APT actor. You have to, sit in and try to do phishing and realistic phishing. And that's the whole idea of being a red team. You need time to actually be able to do this. So that means you can't scale, right? And it's all about going deep. That's what red team is about. I think for blue team, it's a bit more easy because the blue team's objective is really to protect the system. They're supposed to detect the threats and they're supposed to respond to incidents. I mean, of course, there's many more responsibilities. I'm just listing some over here, but you get a gist. So how exactly do you do for purple? So why does red plus blue not equal to purple? I mean, in art class, in kindergarten, we all learned that you add red and blue, it becomes purple, right? So the myth is purple teaming is just red and blue team working together. Why this is wrong is because if you are just going to have them even physically together in the same room, that's not purple teaming. We're talking about trans-team communication. We're talking about knowledge transfer. We're talking about knowledge sharing and process sharing. So we cannot have parallel operations. The red and blue team cannot operate in silos. They have to be working together. They need to understand, how do I bypass this particular detection? Or if I have this particular variant of an attack, how do I build a detection rule for this? So the blue team will need the red team knowledge, and the red team will need the blue team knowledge. That's essentially how you form purple team. You can't just put them together and say that I run one red team exercise first, and then I run a blue team exercise. Oh, I'm done purple. That's not how it works. Purple team exercise is about the integration of the entire idea of these concepts itself. And the other myth that I'm going to bust over here is unless your organization is extremely wealthy, they will say, I want a standing purple team. Nothing wrong with that. But a purple team doesn't have to be a standing team. So that means every single time you need to run maybe like an exercise, or you want to do a purple team exercise internally within an organization, you can just create a joint task force. And this should consist of the organization's CTI, red and blue team. This has to be at least at a bare minimum, is these three teams together. Because why? You need TI to know what you want to test. Yeah, you need a red team to weaponize this particular testing. And then you need a blue team to actually check the defenses and make sure that defenses are working or whatever it's going to be. And with that, now we talk about the key objectives of purple teaming. So why would I do purple instead of red? I've already, highlighted one of the issue just now that I talked about. You can't scale with pure rate by itself. The second is the idea behind Purple is we're not so objective, or should I say, adversary objective driven. What do I mean by adversary objective means that I'm not here just trying to ensure that I compromise your DA, right? That's not what I'm doing over here. I'm testing all your defenses that leads up to that particular step. So the idea then became different, right? The philosophy behind running Purple Team is I want to test how people can potentially compromise this particular system and whether or not I will be able to prevent and detect it. Instead of, I am going to just achieve this particular rate team objective, which is to achieve the DA, and any means necessary. It means that I could, maybe let's say I'm trying to compromise Aaron's computer, I just put him in a chokehold and force him to give me the password. That's possible in the rate team, but not in a real Purple Team kind of scenario by itself. And the second part of it is actually how you can improve both the blue and red team with these kind of exercises. I mean, the blue team is much more straightforward, right? Because you're creating new rules, you're creating new ways of, handling these particular incidents that potentially could happen. For the red team is after you have communicated to the blue team, you realize, oh, actually he's going to be blocking me this way, so I'm going to do it in another variant, I'll do it another way. The idea behind it is you want both teams to be constantly chasing each other. And it should never be in a situation where the red team is too far ahead of the blue team, so every red team exercise is too easy. The blue team is too ahead of the red team, and the red team can't do anything. Then you're not justifying the values of having these teams together. One example that I can quote over here is like Mimikatz. Everybody knows Mimikatz, right? If I were to run vanilla Mimikatz, it's very easy to block it. I just have to get an IOC. I just have to get a hash of vanilla Mimikatz and I block it. And then the red teamer could say, oh, since you're blocking by hash, okay, now I do a stripped down version of it. I recompile it. And then now you have to try to catch the behavior. Some fun Yara rules that I read previously was, they were catching Mimikatz logo. The logo that Mimikatz print out on the standard output, they were catching that. But what if I just stripped it even further? I just use the core functions of Mimikatz. I just want to do my LSAS dump. How are you going to catch me? So the next part for the blue team to get better, they need to understand. They need to put logging capabilities on who is accessing the LSAS DB. And you see, this is how it goes. The red team became better because now I'm no longer just running vanilla Mimikatz. I'm being forced to come up with more variants of doing ways. The blue team is getting better without just having, blocking a hash. Now I'm actually doing behavioral-based kind of analysis by itself. And it doesn't just block Mimikatz. It blocks a lot of other tools that touches LSAS as well. All right, and that's for you guys. Weird knowledge increased. All right, then we're done with all that. We understand what is purple, what is red, what is blue. But when do you choose to do purple? This is very important for the CISOs, and also for whoever is trying to convince the CISOs, or you should do purple teaming instead of constantly doing red. So I did a direct comparison between red team exercise and purple team exercise. So in general, on red team exercise by itself, you are looking at becoming a real APT group. Or you're trying to become a real attacker that's actually attacking this particular organization. While on the purple team angle, you're actually looking, to improve the overall cybersecurity posture. So that means you don't have to care about things like covertness. You don't have to care about that. It's all white box. We're all communicating. The blue team and red team both knows that this particular exercise is happening, and we will want to, work together to make sure that it's working. You don't have to, also, hide things from everybody else because, in a typical red team scenario, only person who's going to know about the red team exercise is the white team, which is the management, and also the red team themselves. And of course, I broke it down even further, on the different compositions and everything. But I'm sure you can read about it. But just remember the previous part about the differences of red and purple. Red is about going deep, purple is about going wide. So what I like to compare this whenever people ask me is that imagine taking a certification. You're taking OSCP maybe, right? And purple is basically all the labs or Hack the Box or Proving Ground. I have no Hack the Box never sponsor me, so I can't say this. But you can do all the labs and make sure that you accumulate enough, enough knowledge so that you are able to make sure that you know what you're going to do. And for red team, it's about the exam that you're going to take. So it's the same. In organization perspective, you're farming the labs by doing purple teaming, and then when you're ready, you call in a really good red team who is going to try to wreak havoc inside your organization and just do whatever they need to do. And now that we understand why we need to do purple, so it's time to go into how do you do purple. And this is the framework that I created back in the days when I was with the government. Don't worry, this is not confidential, and this is public information. So there are a lot of different frameworks that's actually available. Some of my good friends like Bort from Skype. Skype has their own PTEF framework. The other, MITRE has their own framework as well. But for me, oh my God, for me, I call this the PAIR framework, PEIR. So I'm trying to go speak faster so that you can hear more before I become too. Oh, okay, nothing's gonna make sense from here on out. Oh my God. Oh, shish. Okay, anyway, yeah, so the pair framework is broken into 4 phases. As the name suggests, the first phase is prepare, and follow up with execute, and then you have identify, and last you have remediate. This is a traditional purple teaming. So what it means is you're running this in an exercise base. Later, we're going to talk about automation. We're going to be talking about continuous. We're going to be talking about a lot of other stuff. But for now, focus on how do you want to run a purple teaming at the start. So who are the stakeholders that are going to be involved? Well, this is the lowest level, so there can be way more stakeholders. I have clients who's asked me after I've shown them this framework and shown them the stakeholders involved. One moment. Oh. It's got a kick, Aaron. Real kick. Wow. Yeah, they'll ask me like, how come the head of blue team is not involved? Oh, you can involve the head of blue team for sure. You can involve anybody you want. But at a bare minimum, this is what you need to start a purple teaming exercise. God. Okay, so CISO and system owners are basically the white team in this particular approach, basically the management, and they're there to define the scope, the budget, and basically the big picture guys. They don't do the execution themselves, but they're there to make sure that you're staying on track and you're getting all the correct KPIs being sorted in. The purple team manager is actually one of the more important roles that you have, because this person will actually have to, be able to know both the red and blue team elements of it, and they know exactly how they can do the collaboration, what is important to be tested. He or she will be the person that's actually going to be talking to the CTI folks, get a TI so that I know who I'm going to test within the environment. And also, I'm just making sure everything makes sense and who is doing remediation, setting the timeline. So on top of just being a purple team manager, you also have to be the project manager for this exercise itself. The red and blue team, I think, is pretty straightforward, right? Red team engineer is here to provide the weaponization. Blue team is there to just basically make insights and ideas on how the blue team is supposed to work. And of course, the main KPI actually rests on the blue team, right? Because new detection rooms, gaps plugged, all these are actually resting on the blue teams itself. So let's come back to the framework again. Let's go into each one of the stages in each one of the phases. So remember, there's 4 phases. We're going to go into every single one of them, and we're going to talk about, how does this stage in the phases work. The first one, pretty straightforward. Usually this involves everybody, so it's about project scoping. You're looking, whether am I doing a CTI, am I gathering CTI, am I gonna be, what am I supposed to be running within the environment, and work out what are the resources required to make the exercise a success. What is the KPI that you're gonna be measured against? The second is once you have gotten that list of, TI, you're going to go into the weaponization phase. So this is where the red team comes in, and the red team will say, okay, now I want to emulate maybe like APT41, and this is one of APT's 41's TTP. So this is what I'm going to do in this particular element. I will walk you guys through later in how exactly is the thought process behind adversary emulation engineering. And then, of course, execution, conduct, monitoring, analysis. These two, although they are 2 separate stages, but generally they happen at the same time, because when the attack happens, the blue team also has to do the monitoring. So that's essentially to see whether or not what you picked up. And it's actually even easier if you do a paper exercise before this. So the red team and the blue team will sit down, and the red team will tell the blue team, hey guys, I'm going to run this. Can you look at our current detection? Are you able to detect this on a paper basis? So they will put, yes, I can detect, no, I can't detect, or yes, I can prevent, no, I can't prevent. This makes your life much easier after you have done this stage, because the next stage is about identification of gaps. The identification of gaps is where you want to know what you need to fix. And once you have done this particular analysis itself, prior, you already know. So, okay, they say they can detect this, but actually it's not being detected. Dang, there's a gap. They say they can prevent this, but it's not being prevented. There's a gap. So it's much easier for you to go through and do a paper exercise before you actually hop on to do the actual exercise itself. And of course, the last part, pretty straightforward. We close the gaps as we identified, and then we rerun the same attack simulation again. And if it works, everything is working fine, then we go into the reporting stage where we talk about how many gaps we identified, how do we fix this, all the KPI tracking. You give back that paper, that report back to the CISO or whoever is tracking this particular project itself. If it didn't work, then we just go back to step one, which is to close identified gaps again, maybe rewrite the detection rule or create new create new logging capabilities. Alcohol is hitting me here. I'm just rambling on. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. And then after that, you rerun the attack emulation that goes into the reporting itself. So I condense the principles down to what makes a good purple teaming exercise. The first one is you need to communicate well with stakeholders, because most of these stakeholders, especially system owners, they are not cybersecurity trained. They won't know what you're talking about, and they will be like, why am I doing this? Why am I supposed to be doing this? So you got to communicate well and understand which systems are you going to be testing. The second is your blue team needs to be good. You need to know your defenses very well so that you can figure out what to test. Why do I say what to test is very important? Because if you don't know whether or not you have an EDR, then if you know that you don't have an EDR, then I probably would not test the endpoint stuff, because that doesn't make sense. You already don't have an EDR, right? But if you have an EDR, then when I'm doing the scoping of this particular emulation plan, I will put in endpoint-based kind of attacks, especially behavioral-based stuff, like what I mentioned just now, ELSA's DBSS, injecting a new value into registry key, and all that kind of stuff. And the last one is just, you need to make sure the intelligence and your raid team has great capabilities. A good intelligence team will actually make your life so much easier, because then when it comes down to selection of threat actor groups that you're going to be interested in, it is something that you will be able to do from the get-go. Like you already have a stream of data that's coming in, a stream of intelligence to know which particular APT groups you want to be focused or emulating on. Okay, so now we have done everything. In your head, you know what is purple teaming, you know why are we doing purple teaming, and now you know what are the stages that you need to do within purple teaming itself. So let's walk through a mind exercise. I'll give you an example exercise background over there. And it's something that's just recently happened like last month. So you are now working for a telco company, and you have an in-scope system, which is your cloud system, and the simulation is the Singularity, Singularity attack. Just was it a couple of weeks or was it a month back? But pretty recent. So let's say your TI is done a great job. You subscribe to, okay, I should just make up a fake vendor, maybe like CrocDeck or something, a great vendor. I can't say a real vendor. I'm not getting sponsored for this. But hey, yeah, so you got a great TI, and you have really gotten all the different kind of emulation needs that you need from this particular TI vendor itself, and you have created an emulation plan. So you break it down according to MITRE attack stages. You know exactly which one you're going to be running within which particular environment itself. So this is done, and now you need to weaponize this. So you see, I've already walked you through the first two stages of your entire emulation plan itself. Now we're on stage number 2, which is TTP crafting. But before you create TTP, I love to put this slide in, because previously I had an intern, and she told me she joined cybersecurity because she hated coding. And I told her, I said, well, bad luck. You can never escape from it. And it's always about coding when you're in cybersecurity. So emulations is basically like software development. You want to focus on the functionalities of a scenario, and you want to understand how the process of an attack technique works. The idea is you want to emulate the behaviors without malicious intent. How does that work? Come, let me show you how do you create an emulation that will emulate against your defenses without malicious intent. So let's talk about the first one. So you see that we have been moving known malicious LNK and Emotet file into the environment to see if the EPP detects. When we are creating this is pretty straightforward. It's just a hash-based kind of file by itself. But let's say if I were to create a custom-built Emotet to be injected and launched by rexsurf32.exe, search order hijacking, this particular injection that I'm doing, it doesn't have to be like a real malware. It can be anything that is able to be triggered when you're putting it into the search order hijacking itself. So another example that I like to use is the one that we have created previously. Oh, sorry. sorry, previously, so clients are asking us, I want to emulate like cryptocurrency miner. And I will say, sure. Well, then he will say, but I don't want it to impact and be a real cryptocurrency miner. That's what the CISO will say. So then the idea behind it is, how do you catch a cryptocurrency miner that is being put inside your system? It's through your CPU and your GPU usage, correct? So if you look into that, when you're looking into that, there's many different ways of jacking up CPU and GPU usage without having to install a crypto miner. You can just create a recursion of a factorial function, which is actually a very expensive mathematical function. They're definitely going to jack up the resources. And with that, the blue team is then able to check whether am I actually detecting and checking, for all the different kind of stuff that comes down to resource usage within your environment itself. And once you're done, weaponizing and creating everything, it's time to emulate. But you got to check your defenses. Remember, I told you got to understand what do you have that you're preventing against this. It can be products, it can be rules, it can be anything, or even like a personnel that's actually taking care of this particular system itself. So for example, like here, maybe let's say in a cloud environment, you have AWS Code Guru, you have your EDR, you have an enabled guard duty. Or maybe you have your logs being piped over your CloudTrail, and CloudTrail logs are being normalized and consumed by your SIEM. So you have to understand what kind of defenses do you have before you actually start the emulation itself. But after you're done with all that, where do we go from here? So I've already walked you through from the start on what is the need for purple teaming, how do you do purple teaming, and we have went through a few exercises on the frameworks, using that particular framework, how do you do purple teaming. But is that what people really want? No, because in the end, I did not get rid of the one thing that Red Team is able to do, which is scaling. I can't scale Red Team. And if I were to continue doing this on a manual basis, I can't scale Purple Team as well. So how do we go from here? We need evolution. So the market in the last 5 years has been talking a lot about this stuff. How do I go automate? And extremely important to understand, because as I mentioned just now, Purple Team is all about the breadth, all about how wide you can go, right? So if you were to constrain this, like how you constrain Red Team exercise, like what you did just now with my framework itself, you're not going to yield the best result, because it's meant to cover the coverage, and you are constantly going to be only focused on that point in time, and you only know about your defenses at that point in time itself. So this is a visualization of what I just talked about. If I were to only run an annual purple teaming exercise in the middle of June, I will only know how good my defenses are during that month. But I don't know anything from Jan to May. I don't know anything from July to December. But if I were to break this down and I go into continuous security validation, I run maybe like every month, like you can see over here. This will actually make your life much easier, because then you understand what you're lacking in and what am I supposed to be defending against. On top of that, a lot of big organizations have, like advisories that's coming in from vendors. It can be advisories coming in from your policymakers. And then from here, you can also directly, run this through this particular pipeline itself. So I sat down and I decided to create a new framework. This is basically based off exactly what I've done previously, now in a continuous movement by itself. So we're talking about scoping that goes into dynamically, and how you can do adaptive TTP crafting with automated execution and real-time monitoring. The last bit where we talk about reporting and testing by itself, it happens in parallel now. So it's going to this stage where it's called continuous improvement. How it works is essentially when you're sitting down, and I constantly run these particular exercises, what happened is these results will then now be piped backwards to the blue team, like maybe from a Jira board. It can be through Slack, it can be through any other medium. They get mobilized straight away. You build a webhook, you build whatever kind of automation is going to be that helps you to do continuous improvement. And it doesn't stop. So today I run APT41, maybe this particular campaign. Tomorrow I can run APT41's other campaign, because everything is now fully automated. And we're doing all through automation by itself. So we are essentially automating this entire pipeline. But how? The question in your head right now is, how am I going to be automating this? Before we get into that, you need to understand, in order for this to work, you have to have full integration with the SOC. The first part is you have to have great threat intelligence feed, and it cannot come in the form of an executive report. I call those bedtime stories, because once I read them, I fall asleep. They're so long. Second is you want to be linked up with your vulnerability management system as well. What do I mean by that? When you have everybody does VAPT nowadays. Everybody does VA. So if you're using like Tenable, you're using like Rapid7, you're using Qualys, these results will actually help you make sense because you will now know what kind of attacks I want to prioritize. This gives you an idea of what you want to do in purple teaming itself. The third one, of course, is security engineering. Very important because now you're looking at DevSecOps guys, you're looking at people who are going to be creating this kind of automation for you. You need to build a capability in that particular element itself. And lastly, the incident response workflow. Because you don't want to just do manual incident response, you want to have SOAR playbooks, you want to have specific kind of automation that's able to help you until it's been escalated to a certain extent, then you have to throw the big guns in. So everything is about a full integration with the SOC itself before you can actually get onto this automated framework. And this is something that I've come up with as well, is to explain how you can constantly progress through your maturity in purple teaming. If you have achieved what I have just told you about, like how do you do like this kind of automation in purple teaming, you are at level 2. You can go further through continuous improvement because what I mean just now, like with that particular framework, the very heavy emphasis is how do you create a sustainable way for your blue team to constantly fix things? How do you create a way for your system engineers to constantly fix things as well? So let's just dive into level 2 first. Because a lot of organizations at this current stage, they're not even at level 1. So let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. When you want to do this, how do you select the right tool to automate? So the market, as I mentioned, you probably have already seen one of them. They are also here, they're doing like security validations. How do you select the right tool to do automation, right, for purple teaming? Because if you were to do like automation and you don't know exactly what is running, then this is just going to give you a heart attack, especially for your CISO. Because you're going to tell your CISO, hey, great, this is non-malicious, but after you run it, it just ransomware the whole company and you didn't even know that. So the idea behind it, you also want to find the right automation balance. I may sound like I'm constantly pushing for automation a lot, but that decision has to be made by you or made by your decision maker with the idea of how do I automate. When you're looking at automation, it can be used, it can be rolled out very easily with very little manpower required. The resources may not be that great, but it's not very good at testing edge cases on contextualized variants. What do I mean by that? You may have a system, I just do a simple one. You have a web server. It doesn't run on a normal 443. It runs on 8443. Then you need someone to tune and change the attack port. You see, that's additional manual effort that you had to put in already. Or let's say you have specific endpoints on your web application, that these are not included in the generic kind of testing itself because nobody knows about that particular endpoint that you have. It can be totally unique to your organization. So that's not going to be very good for automated. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have manual. But you come back, as I mentioned, manual is a very big problem because you can't scale very well. And then you also need more expertise for your rate team. So that means you probably want to have an internal rate team. And that's additional costs that people have to fork out for. But the good part is, of course, all these contextualized variants that I just talked about, this can be done and tested by the manual testing itself. And of course, there's also people who select to go on a hybrid approach. So that means I do some manual, I do some automated. It's entirely up to you. So the idea behind it is how far on the spectrum are you going to be? And this is really dependent on your budget and also dependent on who you have within your team itself. There's no right or wrong. You can lean more, okay, this is not political, but you can lean more left or you can lean more right. It's entirely up to you. And then once you have sorted that out, you want to understand what is the criteria that I need, to select a tool. What kind of tool am I going to be selecting? So the first one, very important. You want it to be white box. Because remember, 20 slides ago, I said purple team is about knowledge transfer. The blue team needs to know what the red team is running so that they are able to understand and have proper knowledge transfer. The red team needs to know what the blue team is doing so that they will know what kind of variants should I be selecting, how can I be weaponizing specific things. So definitely white box is the only approach towards this. Second is you need automated execution. You can't be sending a guy to sit in a data center for the whole day just pressing enter to run a script or coding out a script on live itself. I've done it, not fun, and huge waste of time. Third is you want to be able to scale through agent deployment. So that means today I want to test maybe like my HR segment of the network. Then I just deploy an agent inside there, I'm able to test it. Tomorrow I want to test like my other part of the network. I just deploy an agent over there and it will work. questions are going to come from CISOs like, hey, I don't want to introduce, like agents into my production. Then don't find a tool that you're able to directly install on a golden image that you have internally within your environment itself. Fourth, you want it to give actual recommendations. It shouldn't be things like, oh, you need to log this. Okay, how do I do that? You need things that actually make sense, that actually tells you how exactly should you be implementing it. Oh, you need to, let's say, for example, with the Mimikatz segment, you need to log. Oh my God, I'm just scared that people keep bringing alcohol up. But actual recommendation, like for the LSAS scenario, like in Mimikatz scenario, I want to log the LSAS DB queries. So every time people hit LSAS DB, I want to know about it. And fifth one, I've already mentioned it just now. You need to integrate it with existing solutions in the SOC. It is useless if you don't integrate it with everything else that you have, like your NG firewall, like your SIEM, like your EDR. Then yeah, it's basically essentially not going to do anything for you. And the last one is, of course, this tool has to make your life easier. It shouldn't be a tool that you buy that actually makes your life tougher. Then what is the point of spending money on that tool, right? So breach and attack simulation is the tool that you're looking for. I will cover the open source version of this particular variant, which in a little bit. But the big problem over here is once you talk about BAS, you also want to understand the differences it has within all the other elements of it. So it's not like continuous automated pen testing, it's not like continuous automated red teaming, because as the name suggests, when you're doing a CAPT or a CART tool, you are just letting it run by itself. You're not actually going to be able to control and go into the white box approach of it. And then this is not a VA tool, because VA only scans, it doesn't validate whether or not this vulnerability is real and it can be exploited within your environment. Because, like for example, not saying Tenable is bad, or we're not saying Nessus is bad. When you run a Nessus scan, Nessus we're going to tell you have this particular CVE that's affecting this particular system. But they will not validate to see whether or not this can be exploited on your system. Maybe it doesn't even have the correct library. Maybe you're running a stripped down version of Linux. Who knows, right? And it's not EASM because it's purely external and you're looking at attack surface coverage. Now you're looking at testing your security controls internally within an environment. So breach attack simulation is a very unique tool that will be able to help you to automate this entire portion of purple teaming by itself. And of course, once you, some good stuff that you get over here is once you have rolled out this particular automated way of doing testing, these are some of the KPIs that will be able to help you to track your success. The first one is, how is your detection coverage across the MITRE ATT&CK framework itself? It can be stage-based, it can be full coverage-based, up to you. Alert fidelity rate, this is something that's been bugging the blue team for the longest time. So now when you run specific attacks, you will know whether or not your SIEM will actually be able to pick up that particular attack itself. And you'll be able to measure your MTTD, your MTTR, this, something that is not very measurable or very manual at this current basis, but with automation, you'll be able to do it very, very fast. And lastly is, of course, the validation of the security investments. Why do you spend X amount of money on CrowdStrike, or why do you spend X amount of money on Defender? You need to make that justification. And now, with data, you're able to justify it with validation by itself. So, what's the tool that I'm going to talk about? Breach attack simulation, I'm going to talk about Caldera. Caldera is an open source tool that is from MITRE themselves, right? So what exactly does Caldera do? First off, it helps you to automatically map every single TTP to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Second, is through its agent-based approach, you are able to do automated TTP execution in any environment that you want, so long as you are getting a bit woozy. So long as you're able to, directly install this within your environment. And as I mentioned, with agents, you're able to scale super easily. You don't have to send 50 guys to 50 different locations to just do, the execution itself. And how does it work for architecture? Very, very straightforward. Just imagine it like C2, like a C2 framework, right? The Caldera server is my C2 server. My agents are my C2 clients. And through the C2 server, I'm telling the C2 clients what you need to be executing. And this can be done through, the core engine by itself, and you have multiple different variants of agents that you can run within your any environment you want. My favorite is SandCat because it's in Go. Once compiled, I can run it both on Windows and Linux. I don't have to do anything else on it. But if you want to run custom agents, you can write it yourself because, as I said, Caldera is an open source framework. You can write whatever you want to do with it. And this can be installed on your endpoints, on your servers, on your cloud servers. I've even tried it on containers, and it works as well. And what are some of the stuff that you're looking to validate, right? So left-hand side is prevention. You're looking at your endpoint protection, you're looking at your network security, your email and your web security, your IAM, essentially. So all this stuff can then be utilized, to push as a way for you to create your own simulations. What are you looking to emulate? If you don't have endpoint protection, which I came across in some organizations, which I found was a little bit odd, then you can just skip that. You can just focus on the rest of it. It really depends on what your organization have, and it can be tuned and customized to what you need. On detection controls, I think I've talked a lot about this over the last couple of slides already, so this should be pretty straightforward. First is SIEM correlation. Your endpoint detection logs, is it coming through? Your network analysis, if you're creating like specific elements or IPS, IDS, actually catching specific, kind of network traffic flow, is it coming back to your SIEM? And also your user behavior. So for context, just put in Singapore government's context. I think it's pretty straightforward. Like my Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it's very common for people to be logging in at 3 a.m. because they need to reply and they need to talk to different kind of people, here and there. But if let's say the Ministry of Culture and Youth, MCCY, they log in at 3 a.m., then that's really weird. Something should be highlighted. So you got to be looking at the user behavior and how exactly you will function and how should you be doing the testing within your organization itself. And of course, you need to validate your detection efficacy, and this will be able to help you with it, especially with a tool like Cloudera. The first one is you want to know how good are your rules, what's your true positive validation itself, and what is your false positive validation. And then you're talking about different kind of tuning requirements. Are there, adjustments needed for effectiveness, or am I receiving too many alerts and my SOC analyst cannot function? So should I be doing correlated rules, or should I be doing like a signal-based kind of rules? And lastly, you want to look at your coverage analysis. Am I too heavy leaning on initial access? Am I too heavy on, like a privilege escalation maybe? So this will be able to help you, and it will help you prioritize. Also tell your detection team what kind of rules should you be actually creating in the first place. Oh, sorry. If you have no idea, then you should start straight up. I'm not going to go through this. Okay, this is pretty straightforward. How do you run the BAS is like every other SaaS that you have. You select, you run it, and then after you generate the report finding, okay? But we still have challenges even with the automated manner of doing things. The first one is technical challenges. Your agent deployment across environments. First, you need to get a buy-in from the system owner because he'll be like, oh, why am I introducing like a whole new thing in my environment? That's going to be tough. This is going to create a security gap that I did not, I did not put into my plan for. And then second is integration with existing stack. What do you have currently, and how do I integrate this into my automated platform? What kind of data am I actually really collecting from these particular guys, and what's important to me? Some of you may just be like, oh, actually, I don't care about the NG firewall. I don't need to integrate with that because all the logs from the NG firewall is piped back to the SIEM anyway. So I just need to integrate with the SIEM. I'll be able to get everything just from the get-go. And of course, where to test? My personal take, always test in production. This is very controversial. People are going to be like, oh, but it's testing. You shouldn't be doing it in production. But in an utopian world, sure, development, dev or staging is exactly the same as production. But ask yourself, any of your organization's staging or development, is it 100% copy of your production? No. Even if, let's say it is, the traffic flow is going to be different. You're not going to be able to do all the kind of stuff by yourself. So the last part, then the other stuff that we're going to talk about is like organizational challenges, like change management. You're talking about resource allocation and prioritization. These are all different processes you have to work through. And lastly, it's very important, as I kept mentioning, you have to have up-to-date threat intelligence. And you need to convert these particular findings to actionable improvements that we have within our environment itself. Am I running out of time? Three more slides. Yeah. Okay, so this is my, basically, if I'm Karl Marx, this is my communist manifesto. But I'm not Karl Marx. So this is my Purple Team manifesto. In my mind, automation can be pushed even further. You can be looking at purple teaming, not just activated based off the need for exercise. It can be activated the moment you have a new detection rule that rolls in. So the moment you develop a rule, this rule will actually be pushed into some form of Git repository, And then from there, you trigger a stage that will actually activate your breach attack simulation tool to execute a corresponding simulation against this rule to see whether or not this rule works. If it doesn't work, then we throw it back to the detection engineer, and then the detection engineer has to work on it further. If it works, then yes, I do automated deployment straight away. So in my craziest fantasy, this is what pure purple teaming is going to look like. And it's not just going to be something that you're going to be doing manually, and it's not something that's just going to be done. I can't go too much deeper into this anymore because I'm running out of time. But this is basically my wettest dream, I guess, when it comes down to purple teaming. And that's it. Any questions? I'll be able to take them, hopefully, before I collapse from the alcohol because it's still hitting me.
Because he went for it overtime, like 5 minutes overtime, another shot, right?
I love RootCon, man. You guys are crazy.
Cheer him up. All right. So let's do this. People at the back, call your friends. People outside, come on in. People at the sponsors booth, they're cleaning up. Leave that place. Come in. All right, we're gonna close this puppy up. Now,